Welcome to Your Town. I'm Scott Dick, your host, and I'm with Josh Metz, the FORA Economic Development Manager. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Nice to be here, Scott.
You know, one of the big things with the Fort Ord reuse development is that it's running out. It's getting close to the end.
Time is running short on the legislatively defined time frame for FORA's existence. Currently, it's set for transition of some form June 30th, 2020. So that gives us about 3 years left to complete a pretty ambitious scope of work.
So what do we have left? What are we going to do in the next 3 years?
Yeah, that's the question that a lot of people want to have answers to. You know, at the Fort Ord Reuse Authority, we work every day to advance the recovery from the closure of Fort Ord, which happened in '94, and the original time frame for FORA's to complete that work was through 2014. That was extended through a legislative act to 2020 because of the complexity of getting all the work done. You know, if you think about Fort Ord, which functioned as a military installation for just about 100 years, training infantry for most of our modern wars, and then making a transition to civilian use, you could imagine the types of infrastructure and urban amenities that we all take for granted were really have changed since the military first put that infrastructure down. So we've had to do a lot of remediation, environmental remediation, removal of unexploded ordnance has been a large body of work that's moving forward and quickly to completion. Indeed, there's a number of old buildings that remain out there. While there have been a fairly large number of those old buildings removed, there's still a number that remain. I think the stats were about 80% complete of removing or reusing all the buildings that were left there. It's about 4,200 buildings that were left.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but there's been some criticism because that process of removing those older buildings hasn't moved faster.
True, and particularly if for many folks their greatest connection with Fort Ord is passing along Highway 1.
Sure.
And there's a number of World War II barracks that are the yellow wood frame buildings that you can see on the hill above Marina and closer to Seaside, just off Highway 1. And those buildings are contained within what's called a specific plan area within the city of Marina. It's called the Dunes at Monterey Bay Development. That's a large development that's planned for about 1,400 homes, a large commercial area, and will fill in where those barracks currently exist. That part of the complexity of taking them down is tied up with the patterns of economic change that we've dealt with through the recession.
Of course.
To now. Things have slowed down, but as the development, the building of new homes picks up speed, we're hoping to see those buildings quickly removed in the years ahead, and that indeed remains one of the priority areas that our staff and through board direction is focused on resolving.
I was always curious about how much it costs to take those buildings out, because some of those buildings are concrete barracks and
Right.
mess halls, and some have been reused, most of them are still there, derelict.
Yeah.
And then you have the wooden structures that were all over East Garrison.
Right.
So
each of the segments of the base, you know, are related to different periods of development that happened there. And so,
on the base.
On the base.
For the military, correct.
For the military, indeed. So the wood barracks that are along Highway 1, those are largely from the pre-World War II and World War II era. Those were developed wood frame buildings, and the part of the complexity of taking them down and the related cost is that they were infused with lead-based paint and asbestos. And as our knowledge of the impacts of those types of chemicals on human health and safety have grown over the years, the need to treat those materials appropriately has required additional steps to be taken to eliminate those buildings. So you wouldn't just say drive a bulldozer through and light a match and hope they were gone. Now you got to pack it all down and take it to a specific storage areas and waste disposal sites. So, but we do have numbers for how those how much it costs to take those buildings down. In fact, the wooden buildings, those two-story frame buildings along Highway 1, they cost about $70,000 each to take down.
Wow.
And farther back on the base, up towards what's now CSU Monterey Bay and the backside of that campus, they're currently in the process of removing 30 Vietnam-era barrack buildings that are the steel and cement multi-story buildings. We refer to those as the hammerheads. If you look at them from an aerial view, they've got sort of a hammer shape.
Oh.
These buildings, they cost around $1 million each to take down. So the campus has received funding through the state to remove those last remaining 30 buildings on their campus, which will be complete in the next couple years. I mean, it's underway, coming to conclusion pretty rapidly. So
we're talking basically $30 million just to take care of those,
just to
put them back down to dirt.
Indeed, and you know that's one of the major complexities of why it's taken so long to see new things emerging out of the ground at Fort Ord. Is before we could build new things, we had to take care of what was there, and so that's been a large segment of FORA's work up until now, and really it's been in the most recent 3 to 5 years. I've been at FORA almost 4 years now, and I've seen in my time there a significant increase in the amount of new structures that have been built, particularly right around our office at Imgen Parkway and 2nd Avenue, where you have the regional shopping center. There's what used to be called Chomp Wellness Center, which has now changed ownership. There's a new hotel that's come up there, the Spring Hill Marriott Suites, which should open in the next couple months. There's a new set of fast casual restaurants that have just opened, and off to the south, large multi-story building, which is the joint DOD-VA General Gorley Clinic, and that also should open this summer. So those are some of the big structures you would see, and then of course the Dunes housing development is rapidly growing. They're doing about let's say 100 plus units a year at the current pace, where they're selling units and building them as they're sold. But those are beautiful new homes, a number of different models, and they're currently selling well. So they're getting a great reception. And as those units grow and those neighborhoods grow, we'll see the subsequent takedown of more of that those old barracks and replacement with housing and commercial areas.
Is there a relationship between that development and the ability to remove those old buildings, or to development and to improve the infrastructure out at the old Fort Ord? Because I know that
very intimately connected. So you know, Fort Ord is a 28,000 square foot footprint, the historic boundary of Fort Ord. So that's about 45 square miles, about the same size as the city and county of San Francisco.
Okay.
And over time, guided by the 1997 base reuse plan, there's been allocation of these lands from the federal government through FORA to a variety of local and state entities. And the process of doing that transfer and then subsequent development of a portion of that is all guided by this plan. But really, I think credit to the plan makers. Indeed, the plan was awarded high honors by the American Planning Association. At its time, it was a leading edge example of balanced kind of mixed use development planning. And so of those 28,000 acres, approximately 15,000 of those acres are currently in some form of conservation status. So all the dunes along Highway 1 that include about a 3-mile frontage on the National Marine Sanctuary, that's all part of the California State Park, the Fort Ord Dunes State Park. So currently open for public access. There's about 3 miles of trail there. There's about 5 miles of paved road and trail. And then there's a new campground that is planned to be developed there as well.
Oh, great.
And then the largest portion of the base, it's about 14,000 plus acres, is within what's now known as the Fort Ord National Monument that was designated in 2012 by President Obama. And that, together with the National Marine Sanctuary, the State Park, and the National Monument, make this incredibly rich landscape of native California landscape for conservation and recreation purposes. So around that, then the remaining land has been allocated for educational purposes in CSU Monterey Bay, which is a thriving kind of centerpiece of the reuse. It's growing to about 7,100 students currently, with about 1,000 full-time employees, well-paid, state employees and faculty there at the university. There's a large segment of land that was allocated to UC Santa Cruz for conservation purposes, and with a dream of developing a research and development park out on the kind of northeast boundary of the former Fort Ord along Reservation Road and Blanco Road in that area, known as UC MBEST, UC Monterey Bay Education, Science, and Technology Center. That's still an effort that we're actively involved in, hoping to realize some gains there. We see great opportunity with the marine research type entities and ag tech. We think ag tech's a real opportunity there, as well as things related to aviation and potential cybersecurity issues. Those are some of the bigger opportunity areas that we see for that development. And then, so that accounts for about about just over 20,000 of the acres. And when we account for the rest that's allocated for different public uses, we end up with about 3,700 acres of that 28,000 that has development potential, what you would think of as housing, commercial, office, and so on. And so all of that development on those 3,700 acres is what is paying for the conservation within the conservation areas and the mitigation of those impacts under the California Environmental Quality Act.
But in order to take care of all of that conservation, is that dependent on full build out?
Indeed. The way that it's currently structured, there's a thing called a community facility district, which is a fee that developers pay, and depends on the type of development that's being done for individual new homes. Currently, the rate of for an individual home is about $24,000 per home.
Wow.
So those units and those fees then are put into a fund that's funding a regional habitat conservation plan, so for maintaining conservation habitat values in perpetuity, and then also paying for mitigations from those developments that really have to do with transportation infrastructure. So so far, FORA is responsible for about 30 miles of new road that have been built on the base. General Jim Moore Boulevard is one well-known. Imjin Parkway is also a new road segment that has been built, as well as a number of other roads within the base, 2nd Avenue and so on.
What happens if FORA goes away? Who's going to pay for those conservation, all those?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and it's indeed what is before the board and the elected leadership that really is the guiding decision makers for FORA's activities. FORA board is comprised of 25 members with 13 voting members, from the cities of Seaside, Marina, Sand City, Pacific Grove, Carmel, Salinas, Delray Oaks, City of Monterey, and the County of Monterey. Those are all the voting members, and then with an associated suite of non-voting members on folks like the president of CSUMB, the president of Monterey Peninsula College, other educational institutions, representation by the Jimmy Panetta's office, Monning's office, Stone's office, and the U.S. Army, as well as the Transportation Agency of Monterey County and others. So it's a large board, and they are charged with, setting policy to achieve the reuse plan goals. And currently they have a decision before them once again as to whether FORA should indeed be transitioned and go away, or FORA potentially would be considered for an additional extension to complete the remaining work, which includes completion of major infrastructure projects planned like the East Side Parkway, or East Side Bypass as it was originally known, improvements to South Boundary Road in Delray Oaks. Those are among the two top priorities, and there's some other farther down on the priority list that remain to be done. Also, the complete removal of all those buildings, both the stuff on what's known as Surplus 2 off to the south boundary of CSUMB campus along Giggling Road, as well as the World War II era barracks along Highway 1 frontage. So that decision is the subject of ongoing study and evaluation, analysis, and debate at the board level. And we would expect within the next year that a decision will emerge as to what may happen. They've already provided direction to staff to pursue two tracks. One is the legislative effort that would be needed to get an official extension of the FORA Act,
right,
and the other is planning for under the current time frame for a transition for the agency that would involve allocating those obligations, those remaining obligations, transportation, habitat conservation, economic development functions, and so on, to the various entities that currently comprise the board.
Josh, those are questions I've had for a while, and I appreciate you answering those for me. There's lots more to discuss.
Indeed.
And so I think I want to have you continue this discussion. We'll talk about especially the infrastructure. Roads are really important given the traffic situation that we have on the peninsula.
Yeah, well, I'd be happy to come back and talk with you more, Scott. It's important for us to get the word out to the community, and I think the more awareness we have of the functions of FORA and the remaining work to be done, I think that'll be valuable for everyone to know.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Hi, I'm Scott Dick. Welcome to Your Town TV, and today I'm here with Mark Bruno, President of the Monterey County Association of Realtors. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Scott. Glad to be here.
Tell me a little bit first about what the difference between a realtor and a real estate agent, and then we're going to get into some of the bigger issues.
Well, the main difference between a realtor and a real estate agent is a realtor has just another level of education that they have to go through. There's ethics requirements to become a realtor. And generally that's kind of it. We've got a board that, takes care of polices our own people and make sure that, we're following those ethics, making sure that everybody is trained and up to speed and staying up to speed. And then we're also advocates for homeowners across the state of California. So there's a huge political arm to the Realtor Association, not only locally in Monterey County, but across California and across the nation. We're one of the largest trade organizations out there.
Yeah, that's true. And as part of that, I I just have to ask you, I mean, there's a lot of challenges out there in the industry, and so to make it easier, how about the top three?
So you're right, there are tons of challenges, and obviously it depends on the individual agent as to which is most important to them. I would say the biggest challenge facing us currently, especially in the Monterey Peninsula and Monterey County, would be just a lack of inventory. There's not enough housing on the market to meet demand of the buyers that are out there, and that's causing some issues. Prices are kind of going up because of that. And some people might think we're kind of at the end of a 7 or 8 year run and the market should be flattening out or shifting. And it almost looks like this lack of inventory is propping that market up still. So we're still seeing price increases and things like that. So in other words, if you're looking or thinking about selling your house, it's the old adage that realtors would say, hey, it's a great time to sell your house. But the reality is right now, it is a really good time to sell your house. I think Pacific Grove had 25 active homes available a couple days ago. So that's almost no inventory compared to the amount of buyers that are out there looking to get into the housing market in Pacific Grove.
Sure, understand that. So that's lack of inventory, that's one.
Yep. I would say kind of the image, and this is kind of a tough one because it depends on who you talk to, but I think that real estate agents and realtors kind of get a bad rap. And if you've ever worked with a really good realtor, they make it look really easy. I mean, I was fortunate enough to come into this industry about 11 years ago. My mom was in the business for 40 plus years, and she was kind of my mentor. And for the first year, I pretty much just shadowed her and did what she did, learned from her, and she has a great reputation here in town. Her name's Linda Nichols, and has been a realtor in Pacific Grove for forever. So I was fortunate enough to have that kind of mentor-mentee relationship with her. But unfortunately, you get newer agents that come into the business. Those agents make it look so easy. The television shows make it sound like it's super easy to become a realtor and get super rich. If you watch some of these shows that are on there, and the way some of these guys portray themselves, I think is not doing us any favors as an industry. But I think a lot of people look at that and go, wow, the real estate market's good right now. People are making money, housing prices are going up, I'm going to get my real estate license and jump into business. They don't realize that the agents that do the majority of the business work 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. We're on call all the time. So there's this perception that it's an easy business to get into and make a lot of money. The reality is it's a very serious business that we're in. We're protecting people with probably the biggest asset that they have, their home, and making sure that they can sell it or buy one and not get into legal problems. Hopefully, if everything goes well, and we're in the most litigious state there is, so you never know how that's going to work. Well, I mean, knock on wood there.
Of course, but you didn't start out. You didn't stay at home and just evolve into real estate.
No, I actually. It's kind of a funny story. I told my mom that I probably never would get into real estate because of the hours that she worked. So I went and, after being in retail for quite a while, took a corporate job down in Southern California with a company called Fujitsu 10 and went from a sales trainer to basically a national sales manager and the product development manager of that company for mobile electronics. And from there, bounced into another company in Arizona where I was a managing director of a public company and had my own brand that I ran there. And what I found out quickly, especially in that environment, is I was working the same hours, just doing it for somebody else,
Sure.
and not making nearly the kind of money that I could be if I was putting those hours into real estate. So long story short, my mom was at a point where she was thinking about slowing down, and my stepsister was working with her and decided she wanted to be a nurse, and the hours were killing her for real estate. So I decided to come back and join my mom's team. That was 11 years ago now.
So, well, nursing is also one of those jobs.
And I think she's learning that now. That's we could do a whole nother segment on that, I'm guessing.
Well, the point is, you brought those hours and that work ethic to organized real estate.
Yep.
And so I think there is a misconception out there that if you're not making it at what you're doing, you can always get your real estate license and sell real estate.
There's that, or there's this perception that, well, gosh, a couple of my family members are going to sell a house in the next couple of years. Maybe I'll just get my license, I'll tend bar or be a waitress, and then every once in a while I'll do a real estate transaction. Hang my license with somebody, or even get my broker's license and do one transaction every couple of years. And the reality is, if you're not doing this day in and day out, the market changes quickly, the forms change quickly, the laws change quickly. You're not doing your family any favors, and you're certainly not living up to your fiduciary responsibilities to your clients if you're only doing this once in a while. So I am lucky enough as the president of the Monterey County Association of Realtors to have the ability to speak to new agents as they come in. I get, I think, 20 or 30 minutes to kind of tell them what I think they should look out for. And one of the things I tell them is if you're not going to be full-time at this job, A, you're not going to make a lot of money at it.
Right.
And B, you're not doing your client a service by, just helping them buy one house or something like that. Because the reality is somebody who's doing it all the time is going to have an advantage. They're going to know more inventory that's available possibly, especially in the market that we're in right now. They're going to be way better equipped to handle the legal issues. Not that we can handle the legal issues, but we know where those speed bumps are, and we know when to tell them they should be talking to an attorney or not talking to an attorney. Same thing with the accounting side of things. We're not accountants, but we certainly know enough to kind of guide them and let them know to get all the information from their accountant. Where I run into agents all the time who are giving legal advice or giving accounting kind of advice, and they're just setting themselves up for a potential problem.
Well, you mentioned something, the forms, and you would think that would be a simple matter, but the forms change all the time, and if you're inadequate, if you're not versed on those forms, then you set yourself up personally to be sued.
Yep.
It's not the buyer or seller often that gets sued, it's the agent, the
Yep.
one in the middle
That's right.
that gets sued.
That's right. Well, and if you're not using the forms, you can go to the forms classes you want, and they're really good. They kind of teach you, hey, this is why this form changed in this particular paragraph or whatever. But if you're not using it regularly, it's really easy to forget, 12 pages worth of contract. There's so many different things in there, and depending on the situation with that particular buyer or seller, you kind of have to know how to guide them through it. And then what I like to do with my clients, I actually like to sit down with them before we sign the offer and go over the entire offer and also set up expectations. Here's what you can expect to happen. Here's why we're signing liquidated damages, but maybe we're not signing arbitration right now. And you go through all of those different things with your client and educate them on the process. And you're also setting it up so that down the road, they kind of know what to expect if the deal does go together.
Right. Because I know that in a lot of people's mind, it's simple enough if you put an ad in the newspaper, take some nice pictures of a home and put it on the market, it will sell itself.
Yep.
And you know that that's just not true.
Yeah, I mean, you can, well, it's easy right now. With the lack of inventory, it is easier to sell a home right now. Mm-hmm. The problem isn't selling the home or not selling the home. Our job is to get that seller as much money as we can get them as their represented agent. So if we undervalue the home here in the Monterey Peninsula, it's not like what you read in Los Gatos or San Jose where you've got millions of people right there that are looking for a house, mm-hmm. and there's only one coming on the market, and they're going to get 27 or 47 offers on that one property. If you undervalue that house, the market's going to make up for it up there. Down here, that's not the case. If you underprice a house here, you might get 3 offers or 4 offers, and they might be investors. And, somebody may be looking to flip a house. They're watching the market. They know the deal. They know if they pounce on it right away, they might get a chance to buy it below market value.
Because they know it's below market value.
That's right. So we get agents from out of the area who will come down here and list a house, and they will, tell their clients that they know this market, they work this market. The reality is they've never sold a home here, or maybe they sold one home in their life. And there's a deal in Pebble Beach right now where a house sold with a lot next to it, and the guy that bought that house has now put it right back on the market with the lot separate for more money than what he just bought it for. And we're not talking about a year later. We're talking about purchase the house when it first hit the market, recognize it as a deal, and then went ahead and put it right back on the market, creating an opportunity for himself to make money. And there's nothing wrong with the agent that represented him as the buyer's agent, right. But that seller's agent was not from our market here, and she probably could have priced the house a little bit higher. I don't know the situation behind the seller. The seller maybe needed to sell it right away, right, and wanted to price that way, in which case they did a fantastic job. But looking at it from the surface, you're going, man, that's a mistake, right, that somebody made because they weren't in our market down here.
Well, when we talk about the market up in the Bay Area, I saw a statistic last year that said that on properties in San Francisco, once they were listed, they were getting $300,000 and $400,000 offers over listing price.
That's right.
And that's what they're $300,000-$400,000.
Yep.
That's what they're selling for.
But the reason that happens up there and the reason you can get away with it is because they didn't get 2 offers. If
Right.
2 people are writing an offer on that, they're not going to write it asking. If 25 people are making an offer, they know they're not going to get it at the asking price. They're going to have to go way over to get it. So then it becomes who's willing to bet on the come that, hey, even $400,000 over asking is still going to be a great deal a year from now or 2 years from now or 3 years from now, or I'm going to keep this forever. It doesn't matter.
Right, exactly. So we talked about the first 2 challenges. Is there a third one in there, or did I miss it?
Well, I think that out of area agents is something I wanted to talk about in general. You know, they keep talking about a statewide MLS. And so if you have a statewide MLS, that means there's a reciprocal agreement between the selling agent and whoever brings the buyer in. Well, if you've got agents now from Southern California coming into, let's say, Carmel, which is a very specific, eclectic kind of an area, or Pebble Beach, or Pacific Grove for that matter, Monterey, you're going to have agents coming in here that don't know anything about the market. They don't know about the sewer lateral policy in Pacific Grove. There's all these little things that we know because we work it on a regular basis.
Sure.
It's the same thing. Like, I won't even go to Santa Cruz and sell a house because I don't know the local customs in Santa Cruz, and that's 45 minutes or an hour away. So if I have a client who wants me to represent them and sell their house in Santa Cruz, I find an agent in Santa Cruz that's highly qualified, and I have them talk to that agent. I refer it to them. Because I don't want to make that mistake. My job is to do the best thing I can for my client as a realtor. And it certainly wouldn't be the best, in my client's best interest, if I went up there and tried to sell their house in a market that I don't know anything about.
Yeah, that's perfect the local market.
So in general, I mean, the whole realtor thing is to have this fiduciary responsibility to your client. And the state of California, get a license, they talk about the fiduciary responsibility and how important that is. Yet if you're willing to go outside of your market to represent somebody, it kind of goes against that fiduciary part of it. Wouldn't you want to get an expert in that area at least to work with you to help buy that? Because I know, I'll give you a great example. I sold a house 3 years ago or something like that, where it was on the market. We knew it was priced too high. The seller just wanted to ask a certain price, wasn't super motivated to move. Put it on the market, and for the first 3 months we get nothing, crickets. I mean, nobody's coming to the open houses. We're getting no activity at all, except I get one agent out of the Bay Area who keeps calling me and asking questions about water down here and what they can do. Mm-hmm. And they really don't know our market, it's obvious, but they have a buyer who's interested in moving down here and obviously pick that house as one they're interested in. So about 3 months into the deal, I get an offer from a local agent well under the asking price, which was actually exactly where we told our seller that house probably was going to sell. So this guy had done his homework, knew the comps, said, here's what this house is worth, and brought an offer in. So me representing my seller, doing a good job for him, I immediately called that agent from out of the area and said, hey, we got an offer on this. If your client wants to get in on this, they need to bring an offer down. They bring an offer down basically at full asking price. We do what's called a multiple counter offer, which you ask both sellers, buyers to bring their highest and best offer. The agent from out of the area comes in well over the asking price, no contingencies. So no inspection contingency, no loan contingency, no nothing. They're buying the house as is, and their client hasn't even been in the house yet. So, and our local agent said, well, we're not going to raise our offer. We're staying right where we are because that's what the house is worth. So there's a great example of a client from out of the area being represented by somebody who's a friend or a family member that's also from out of the area, not doing the best job they can representing somebody here. So I look at that, and especially in my position now with Monterey County Association of Realtors and being involved more with the California Association of Realtors, I look at that and going, man, we're kind of headed down this path where we're trying to make the MLS where everybody can see it. And I think that good agents know to get help, but back to these inexperienced agents, they're looking at it going, man, if I could sell $1 million house, that's $25,000 a commission or $30,000 a commission or whatever it is. Right. It's income for them. I think the money's motivating them to do things that maybe they shouldn't be doing if they're taking their fiduciary responsibility more serious.
So the fiduciary duty, in a very brief explanation, can you explain that? Because a lot of people have heard that term, but they're not quite sure what that means.
Yeah, basically it's, and I believe it's a legal term that basically means our responsibility is to do the best that we can do for that particular buyer or seller. So we become an agent operating on their behalf, doing what we can do to help them get the best possible transaction that they can get.
And
So whether it's sell the house at the highest price, protect them against maybe some of the pitfalls that could happen in the contract, our responsibility is to do all of that to the highest level that we know how.
And that's the importance of representation, isn't it? Versus just
You
buying
got
a
it.
house off the internet.
Exactly.
So that okay. I think we've covered a lot in the last in this segment. And I think maybe we should probably continue this because there's a lot more. You mentioned advocacy and outreach. That's something that we should probably talk about.
Sure.
Also, the real estate in the state of California is bigger than just one area or one location. That's something maybe we should talk about. Also, the relationship maybe between housing affordability and inventory. I think there's another. That's a place that we could go. To wrap up this segment, is there anything else that you'd like to mention? It's on your list.
Well, no, nothing really that's on my list. I would say in general, becoming a realtor is a great business to get into, but don't believe the stuff that you see on television. I had a kid come to me, wanted to be an intern, great kid, and first question I asked him, I said, well, why real estate? He said, well, I've watched $1 Million Agent, and these guys are making all this money selling these multi-million-dollar houses. I want to make that kind of money. Wrong motivation to get into real estate. For me, the best part of the business that I have found, and pretty much everybody that I work with, they always look at getting your buyer into their first house is such a great feeling, or being able to sell a house for enough money for one of your sellers where they can go on and retire the way they want to retire or do what they want to do. That's the reward. If you take care, this old cliche I always use, if you take care of your people, if you take care of your clients, the money takes care of itself. Sure. And you look at all the top agents that are out there, I think that's what they do. They focus on taking care of people. And it's amazing how, the good fortune kind of comes behind that, and you can build a great business and have a great future in the business.
Well, Mark, I really appreciate you coming on Your Town TV, and I'll have you again.
All right.
See you.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Scott Dick. Welcome to Your Town TV. My guest this segment is Mark Bruno, president of the Monterey County Association of Realtors. Mark, thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me back. I'm surprised you actually asked me back for a second segment, Kevin. Or Kevin, Scott. I call you Kevin too. That's great.
That's all right. That's all right. We both know him.
Yeah.
Earlier on, I've had Josh Metz from the FORA Reuse Authority, the Fort Ord Reuse Authority, on, and we talked a little bit, just a bit about housing affordability. And I know before you and I had talked, we had mentioned one of the big challenges of real estate is just the lack of inventory as it stands now. There's some development going on at the old Fort Ord, but as far as regular development, anything happening on the peninsula?
No, I think Fort Ord's pretty much it right now that I know about. There's some discussion about Rancho Cañada, that development down there, but now traffic's an issue with that, last I heard. Right. So who knows where that'll end up. I think that before you even talk about Monterey County, you have to talk about the state. And some of the figures the California Association of Realtors is throwing around is, for the last 10 years, we've been 100,000 homes short across the state to keep up with the population growth. So if you do some real simple math, 100,000 homes
a year
times 10 years, that's 1 million homes we're short in the state of California. You're not going to be able to make that up, especially now that the market's as high as it is. So if you don't have the houses when the market's low, and nobody's going to want to build any houses when they can't make any money on them. Right. So if you don't have that inventory yet, the population continues to grow the way it is. Now developers going, hey, the prices are high enough, we could build homes. Nobody's going to be able to afford them. So it just compounds the problem in, my little view of the world. And I think Monterey is kind of a little mini version of that. You look at the whole county, I think it's the same thing. We don't have enough housing here in the peninsula side for, people that come here and work every day. and Salinas doesn't have enough housing. You don't have enough housing down in the South County, the Valley. So somebody needs to kind of get some housing going. I think there is some housing being done down in Soledad
Right.
in that area. I don't do any business down that way, so I don't keep up with it maybe as much as I should. But I think there is some building there, but it's definitely not enough to take care of the problem that we have.
So it's basically a traditional supply and demand economic issue that's
Well-
irrefutable.
Yeah, and I think it's beyond that. I think it's a political issue now. I don't think anybody wants to see their hometown overrun with development, especially along the coastal parts of the state. And I remember as a little kid that being an issue, and different factors being used to kind of limit growth.
Right.
So at some point, I think we have the same people arguing that we don't want growth, but they're also arguing that we need more affordable housing. At some point, I think you said it best before, we need to call these people out and say, look, you can't have both. We either need to be able to develop some housing so that we can have some affordable housing, which means we need water and resources to build
Right.
and to have resources for these
Well,
people.
let me see if I get this right. So if you have homes at different purchase price or economic levels, and they're full because we have little inventory, either if you own or you rent. So somebody owns those rental homes. So
Yep.
you only have so much inventory. So if you build a new home, from my understanding of this, what happens is, let's say, and we've heard the argument against people building market rate homes.
Sure.
I've heard them been called greedy developers.
Yep.
Here's the problem or the situation. You build a market rate home. The family that's been in a starter home now has had their second child or their third child, or their kids move back home with them, and they have the economic capacity to purchase a market rate home. They move up.
Yeah.
That frees up a home.
That's right.
That's got a market. That's got a maybe first time buyer,
Yeah.
or if it's a medium price home, that first time buyer moves up.
Yep.
And then the person that's been living in an apartment who's ready to have kids and move up moves up.
Yep.
And so I don't think that people make that link between this market rate home and how everybody comes up.
Everybody comes up. Yeah.
And so it's one thing, I think, to build affordable housing and call that what it is, affordable housing. It's going to help, if you build 15 units, it's going to help 15 families.
Well, and there's an argument against that too. A lot of these families qualify for affordable housing when they buy it, but 5 years down the road, they could have a great job change and they've got all kinds of money, yet they have this very inexpensive house that they're occupying that should be used for somebody who qualifies now for low-income housing, and these guys should be moving up into something out of that bracket.
I think people don't understand also the difference between inclusionary housing, workforce housing.
Yep.
Everyone has a tendency to lump it under
It's all
affordable housing.
affordable housing.
And really, if you build market rate homes at a certain level, you're creating affordable housing.
That's right.
So I think that what I know about the Monterey County Association of Realtors and the California Association of Realtors, that's a big issue, housing affordability.
And for the state right now.
Well, of course, for the state, because the state can't house the people they have. And we see that directly at the level of homelessness in cities. I remember 20 years ago, I was stationed at DLI at the time, where they had, during the big tech boom, they had people making $85,000 living in their cars because they couldn't. Now that's $85,000 a year, which today, if people had that money and didn't live on the coast, they'd have a nice life.
Yep. Yeah.
And so I think the roadblocks to building is so fraught with emotion that, I mean, we don't have to look at it purely economical because of this fabulous coastline that we're trying to take care of. But there's a second part where, don't come complaining to me because rents are high or homes are out of sight, because you're also against building.
That's right. That's right.
So we talked about affordable housing a little bit, and I didn't mean to steal your
No,
thunder,
I mean,
but
you obviously have spent a lot of time on this issue, and I know you're passionate about it, so it's good to have you talk about it.
So it's one of the challenges of being in professional real estate is we talked a little before about ethics and ethical challenges, and not so much that in your team or who you work with, but from outside and how those are addressed. And so what does, for example, organized real estate, like the Monterey County Association, which is a bigger part of a trade organization, just in generic terms, those ethical issues, how are those addressed?
Well, I think the biggest issue we have in general with ethical issues is most agents don't want to make a big deal out of an ethics problem. They try to work it out with the other agent. And the problem with that is if the other agent even recognizes they're doing something wrong, they're probably going to apologize, say, oh, that's great, and I'm really sorry, and it won't happen again. The reality is the chance of those two agents coming together and working on another deal together to see if that's true or not are, slim to none. And the pattern of what that agent is doing, the one who's doing something unethical or not doing, is probably not going to change. And I know I've encountered it, and then when you talk to other agents, without mentioning a name, you say, hey, yeah, this happened to me on a deal, and they'll say, oh, were you working with so-and-so? And they hit it right on the head. So I think what has to happen is that culture needs to change. And I don't know when it changed in the past. Maybe when the markets get really good, you just overlook a lot of that stuff, and you just go and keep your head down and go on to the next deal and let that one go and not get tied up in the process of bringing somebody up in front of the ethics committee or whatever. So I think that as agents, we would need to change the way we think, and when somebody is doing something that's blatantly wrong, we need to actually make the claim, and then we need to follow through with a hearing and make them face the music on what they're doing. Otherwise, people aren't going to change. And the reality is there are agents out there that probably should not have a license. And one of the benefits of working with Jeff Davey being our formal real estate commissioner, he knows where the lines are crossed, and,
right.
And he's actually pretty good about making the phone calls and at least getting the broker on the other end notified that they've got an agent with a problem. But in general, I don't know how many people are bringing things up in front of the board. I know we've had an increase lately, which would make sense because there's less inventory. There's a lot more competition to get listings and a lot more competition to get buyers.
Right.
So I could see how we would have more ethics type hearings going on right now. Whether people are found guilty or not, I don't know.
Well, I think also, I'm sorry for interrupting, but I think also it's a matter of training. As we train people,
Absolutely.
like, look, let us have this process.
Well,
we'll sort it out.
So training's one thing. I mean, I've sat through a bunch of ethics training. The problem is until you're out there and confronted with the issue, you really don't know how to navigate through it. So Keller Williams has a mentor-mentee program. And I think for me, that was the most valuable thing I had. Not that it was with Keller Williams, but being able to sit with my mom and shadow her for a year and, be in the car when she's on the phone talking to her clients with them on speakerphone and listening to what they're saying and then how she would respond to them and listening to other agents and how she would work together with other agents gave me an opportunity to see into that side of the industry that I don't think you can teach in a class. You don't have enough time, and people don't have enough attention span to absorb that. So I almost think you need to have some sort of a mentor program for newer agents coming in. And like I said, Keller Williams recognizes that. They have a pretty cool program, and it's something they do nationally.
Well, what I meant by the training is that the spike in ethical violation claims could be a result of training. For more people who've trained on this is what the ethical issue is, then they go, oh, I see. It sounds really simple if you forget to do something or don't do something or say something that you shouldn't say.
Yeah. Most of the violations that I've seen are pretty blatant. These aren't like oops. These are I mean, because I don't think any agent is going to turn somebody in for an ethics violation for an oops.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's got to be something pretty blatant and
where you've considered the idea that
somebody maybe has considered the consequences already and went ahead and went down that road anyway because there was some sort of personal gain involved in it, and
that's where you really get into trouble. And that's
right.
serious because
that's right.
In that personal gain part, then you've violated your fiduciary status.
You got it.
Then you're in trouble with the state, not just the
that's
local
right. That's
realtors.
Right. That's right.
Interesting.
So I don't know. I mean, I think that's where we see where people really get in trouble, and you read about it in the paper eventually that stuff comes out, but those are the real issues. I mean, some of the little stuff, I mean, we kind of fight back and forth, and I'm guessing that in most cases, and it'd be fun to ask actually Kevin this because I don't pay attention, but it'd be fun to see out of all the claims that come through, how many of them are actually, guilty, not guilty, or if they're both kind of a little bit in the gray area, because it's always two parties involved.
Sure.
So it'd be interesting to see statistics on that.
Well, the good thing about ethics, most ethic rules, is they're pretty clear.
Yep.
And so if you're supposed to do something and you don't, going through the process, if the person is a mature adult, they won't forget to do that again. Especially if they've sat and had to answer to people like, how did you forget that?
Yeah.
Or if they did something they shouldn't have done, then calling out people, because ethics is a slippery slope. It's almost, well, it's not almost. It is actually the moral courage to do something that's not popular.
That's right.
Also to not do something.
That's right.
That's popular. And it's like, no, we're not doing that. And so that's the kind of training where where you give examples over and over again, and it's still not the same as going out there on the street and seeing it occur and say, well, what are they doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I get that. I think that's really a distinction between your average real estate agent, and I don't mean to, in a pejorative way towards ethical real estate agents, but realtors and the brand.
Well, and we probably should state the obvious. I mean, guys, we're talking 99% of agents out there that are realtors, I think, are ethical.
Sure.
But there's always that element, and I don't care whether it's real estate or attorneys or car salesmen, whatever it is. Well, it's funny how those three are all kind of bracketed together there, and they have that reputation.
Exactly.
But, you've always got that certain percentage of them that maybe are not following the rules and are doing things the way they want to do them, and therefore unethical.
Exactly. And I think what happens is it damages the entire industry, and
there's no doubt about it.
Well,
look at how. I mean, I said it on the last segment, but look at how Hollywood portrays realtors. We're an easy target to. Was it 2.5 Men, with the mother that was the realtor?
I didn't watch that show.
Oh my God! It was anyway. I mean, it was hilarious how they presented her. She just cared nothing about getting the deal done, and I would laugh because it's a comedy.
Sure.
But the reality is, we all know who that agent is out there
in our community,
and the way she would dress, and all that stuff.
Sure.
That's kind of the typical real estate agent. So I don't know. To me, it was kind of funny.
I know that some of the challenges as an organization is to make sure that things like public policy as we say, it's a lot easier to help public policy than it is to fix it, help create it versus fix it. And I know that members of the Monterey County Association of Realtors are very good about working to make the community better. I mean, they live here, they're small business entrepreneurs,
Sure.
They have an interest
Sure.
in making sure that public policymakers are not just out to...
Well, even more base than that, you look at real estate's a local thing. I mean, you read some of these big companies out there, and a lot of the internet companies are saying, well, no, it's a national thing, watch. The reality is, when it comes down to buying a house here locally, people are more comfortable buying a house with somebody who's involved in the community. They're volunteering. A lot of the clients that I have sold homes to in the past now volunteer with us at the AT&T golf tournament.
Oh,
or they
good.
volunteer with us at the concours. And we actually offer that. I mean, I'll send them an invitation because it always comes up when we're driving around looking at houses or whatever. So what a better way to get somebody who's moved here, it's their dream to retire in Pebble Beach or Carmel or Monterey or Pacific Grove, and what a better way to get them involved in the community. And in a lot of cases, these are fairly well-to-do people who can have a large impact
Sure.
on the community, with their time and their knowledge and also financially. So it's great getting people involved, and for our whole team, it's one of the things that we stress. You need to be involved. You need to be, have something that you care about outside of real estate, and you need to give back.
So this
that's part of it.
This really is a personal business.
It certainly is a personal business. I mean, I look at it every time I meet somebody from outside the area. I have the coolest job in the world. I get to show them one of the best places on the planet to live. And then if they decide that this is where they want to be, I then get to help them find their home, which is a hugely personal thing.
Oh, yeah.
And then help try to inject them into the community in a way that they want to be, or in some cases they're good without that, but at least open those opportunities up to them and offer them to them.
It's hard to do that over the internet, isn't it?
It's really hard to do that. Yeah, on a website.
On a website.
Yeah.
Well, it's absolute pleasure, Mark, having you on Your Town TV. I think as we continue, I'm not sure what's going to happen in the next couple of years. We know that with the FORA, Fort Ord Reuse Authority, possibly going away, and the development of Fort Ord, and building homes, and it's just so much. Trying to take care of the people who live here, trying to make a living, trying to make sure it's a great place to vacation, a place to have recreation.
Yep.
Recreate is the word they use.
Yep.
It's all part of I don't want to call it a fight, but a struggle.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about water.
No.
It's amazing how we stayed away from that subject, or water bills right now,
Oh.
which mine just I think almost doubled. So
Yes, so we'll get to that. Don't worry. Your Town TV.
I'm not sure I'm the guy that wants to be in the seat when you have that conversation in this community, but
I will. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate Mark,
All right.
President of the Monterey County Association of Realtors.
thank you, Scott.
This is Your Town. I'm Scott Dick, your host, and thanks for watching.